event with a series, Brussels Talks, powered by NCBR office in Brussels, together with Business and Science Poland. My name is Ewa Kocińska-Langer, and I have the pleasure and honor to run the office in Brussels, together with my colleagues. As I said, this is a series, Brussels Talks, so we are taking up different subjects every month with different distinguished guests. So today we have with us Mrs. Michela Magas. She's the expert in the European Commission high-level roundtable dealing with new European Bauhaus, and that's the reason why she's with us today. Before I will go to a short introduction of Michela, I would still like to give you some information about the Click meeting platform we are using, just for everyone to have a smooth event. So this is a 1-hour event, and the scenario is that first we will give the floor to Michela to feed us with some new knowledge about new European Bauhaus. And you can always ask questions using the chat to Michela. We will also put on the chat questions we already received before the event from you during registration, but you can also ask questions live, let's say. And after Michela presentation, we will go directly to Q&A, and I hope we will have enough time to answer all of them, because we already have quite some, and I hope some others will pop up as well. In case the window with us is a bit covering the screen, but I don't think it's always the case. But just in case, there is a button in the corner, in the right bottom corner of the screen with us, so then you can click it, and then it will be docked rather at the side of the screen. That will be important for the presentation, I think. Yeah, that's it. If you have any technical issues, also please write them in the chat. We will manage that during the event. Okay, and now back to our topic. This is really a hot topic at the moment in Brussels for already quite some time, and we are extremely happy that we have Michela Magas with us. She's the innovation catalyst, and as I said, the member of the new European Bauhaus high-level roundtable, operated by the European Commission, and she has really enormous experience in the field. She's, as I said, innovation catalyst, and she bridges the worlds of science, art, design, technology, academia, research, industry. Really a long record of different achievements, including the European Woman Innovator of the Year in 2017, and also Innovation Luminary Award for Creative Innovation in 2016. And she's also the creator of the concept of the industry commons, and I think we will hear more about that also directly from Michela. So before we will go to the Q&A with our questions, I think I will now give the floor to Michela to tell us a bit about new European Bauhaus as an introduction to our discussion in the second part of the event. So Michela, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm really pleased that we can actually spend an hour talking about the new European Bauhaus. It's an extraordinary initiative. It's very, very unusual, a new form of policy making. It's not just a spin, it's not just talk, it's actually happening. So I'm very pleased to be able to tell you what has been done so far, and then we can actually discuss about what's happening at the moment, or the questions that you have pressing in terms of what's happening, what's coming in the future. Basically, this is the wonderful group of people that I am very privileged to be part of. So the high-level roundtable works with the president and also with commissioners Gabriel and Ferreira, and it's a very, very positive atmosphere. It's really full of hope. It's full of positive intention. There are no hidden agendas here, which is really, really refreshing, and it's very much aiming to feed policy directly from the grassroots, from communities, from feedback from citizens, from engaging citizens, engaging creative communities on the ground. Of course, the culture creative sector is here incredibly important, and it's really a driving force that can engage these communities. It has proven to be really a catalyst for all kinds of activities that can take us towards the Green Deal. And of course, the main mission here is to support this big ambition to get us towards the Green Deal, particularly in terms of intervening in the living environment, creating it in more sustainable ways, and also looking at all kinds of practices that currently need fixing, like fixing lifetimes of product cycles, so that we make sure that we dispose of them or recycle them, or that we reuse materials, or that we look at extractive practice, or reducing extractive practice, etc. I'm sure there are lots of topics that will be of interest to you. One of the things that I think is really important is this idea that we can engage the people on the ground. And the thing that I really, really wanted to tell you is we are bringing our own personal experiences to the high-level roundtable. And I have personally been running for the last 10 years with a huge global community of innovators. There are around 8,000 members now. Experiments on the ground where we interact with new technologies and we actually look at how they affect humans and look at their impact. And one of the examples here is we ran an event at Slush in Helsinki. We ran 5 days of experimental labs. And we put at the center of our lab a wonderful vocal coach and very proud to be a blind singer, Riikka Hänninen. And she was basically trying new types of technologies to see how they can enhance her abilities. Now, our neuroscientists in the room created a system that adapted neurofeedback that is usually used for clinical trials to analyze people who suffer from attacks. And what it usually does, it visualizes their brain activity so that they can train to control their attacks early. They adapted it to go up and down the musical scale. And in this way, we were able to test everybody in the lab as to how fast can their brain adapt to be able to run up and down the musical scale directly from their brain. And what happened was that people would take around 2 hours to be able to train. But what happened in the end was that Riikka, the blind singer, put the neurofeedback sensor on, and she was able to do it instantly. And so the amazing lesson that we learned from this was that with the new interfaces and the new systems that we're building, there's a complete redefinition of what it means to be a worker, or how does this impact the future of work? Because of course, in the mechanical era where Riikka would have had to have pressed buttons and she would have to have seen levers to move, she was labeled as disabled. So there are completely different categories of people that we need to reconsider how we think about these things. So this is a very important example of how we learn from the grassroots, how we learn from the ground. Another example here is at the time that we had really serious problem in Europe with immigration in 2016, And we had a wonderful inventor from Iran who was part of our labs, and he was able to produce this really fantastic new application that was produced in very, very cheap environment with available data. But then it turned out that it was like an iPhone for the primary industry. So we were able to test in one domain. It was testing it within the creative sectors with some data from the creative sector. We were able to take that over to another domain where it was actually a breakthrough application. And it turned into very, very fast into a patenting application for the primary industry in Sweden. And so we actually proved this on several accounts, basically not only about inclusion and about exploiting the talents of all of the people who can contribute to our advancements, but also the fact that we can work across disciplines. So this is another really important lesson that we learned from the ground. Now, when I was advising to the G7 leaders on innovation, and I was very, again, privileged to be sent by the European Commission to do that, we were asked by the leaders, how can we use digital technologies to interact with our citizens? And the lesson that I had learned from working with our community, I translated into policy in a sense that we saw, for instance, data-enabled bicycle sharing schemes or data-enabled public buildings or cultural heritage as being the places for interaction between governments and their citizens. So the new kind of frontier, and I was able to pass that recommendation on, and that was really really illuminating for the politicians. So I want to show you some of the paradigms that have been moved by the new European Bauhaus, this type of thinking that's been adopted. So the examples I showed you is from my practice, and this is sort of what I bring on board. But what has actually happened is connecting all of our practices on the ground to the mission of the European Bauhaus. And what we have created as a high-level roundtable was a concept paper which you can access online, and I really suggest that you go and read it, because it is you will see the different language that's being used then from what you're used to, and some of the paradigms that have been moved with this concept paper I will now illustrate for you. So this is, for instance, an example where we are challenging Industry 4.0 with putting humans in the loop and interacting with industrial robotics. So this was as part of the AI Impact Lab in Örebro. This is part of my lab's practice. I'm putting this there because this was, as I say, us challenging Industry 4.0, which was launched only in 2017. And you are probably aware, if you are following the European program, that the Industry 4.0 priority on automation has now shifted already to Industry 5.0 with putting human-centric as a priority. But because in the new European Bauhaus, we are already working really hard on where is our next frontier? And we have already shifted from human-centric to more than human. Why? Because we are concentrating on sustainability. And sustainability as our priority means that we need to think ecosystemically. So beyond human to other species and other ecosystems. So this just shows you how much this initiative is able to push the frontiers and to the next boundary, but it's making us actually progress a great deal faster because of that. Another example is the idea of inclusion, and basically how we think about inclusion is really important. We often talk about mental models and about how we approach a subject matter. And we are here even challenging the Industry 5.0 paradigm. In this particular image, you will see some examples of our lab participants, and you will see just how inclusive our labs are. But when we look at what the European Bauhaus strategy is able to do, well, where Industry 5.0 is welcoming several categories of people, where perhaps before only one category of people would be admitted. Now in the European Bauhaus, we are advocating for this new mental model of radical inclusion. Radical inclusion starts from where we converge. So what it doesn't do is divide people into categories. What it does do is look at where we converge. So when you think of what is our space for common understanding, where can we come together? That's our starting point. It doesn't matter where you belong. So this is actually a really has been really successful in practice. This is also something that we have learned from the ground. Another example is that when we talk about why we work or why we need skills, this is, for instance, an example again from the grassroots experimentation where we were sending voices to the moon, literally, via the Dwingeloo radio telescope in the north of Holland. And human voices were reflected off the moon live in 2.3 seconds, bounced back, and they came back to the recipient. This was done with the members of our labs. In the photograph, it's Imogen Heap. You may have heard of her. She's a globally known artist and blockchain activist. And Imogen was really thrilled with this experience. It was massively inspiring, but there were 83 people who did this. And why? Because it puts everybody in the frame of mind of being able to attempt moonshots. It's actually getting the feeling that one is able to deal with grand missions. And so what happened in the European Bauhaus recommendations is that whilst Industry 5.0, of course, is looking at now very strongly into upskilling by training with digitization and digitalization, which deals with the business side, the European Bauhaus, the future of work is driven by missions. And this is, again, a different way to think about things. So one of the things I want to highlight is something that has been mentioned that I have found it something called the industry commons. And some of these really strong ethical aspects are really embedded in the holistic thinking. We are now thinking in sort of, across Europe. So when we think about policy making that's linked to the digital, for instance, one of the most important things is to have a whole series of supporting systems there that can actually give us the foundation for building new types of innovation, and they can get us towards the Green Deal. And these, of course, mean embedding systems of sustainability and resilience and systems of responsibility, like responsible AI and work ethics and societal values into the way that we think about things. So again, I will always come back to the people on the ground and engaging communities, because actually what has happened is that all of those systems that we are now thinking about have come from what we have learned, for what really works, from actual hands-on experimentation. And one of the main things that's now happening is through the implementation phase in the European Bauhaus, is that we end up with people being now discussing how we can create a lab, a NEB lab, that will actually engage people not only in the big centers in Europe, but obviously, very importantly, all across the regions. So I'll be happy now to take some questions from you, and then we can actually discuss in greater detail both what has been done and what is to come.
Thanks a lot, Michela. That was very inspirational, I would say, and a very different way of speaking about things that we are used to in our research and innovation community, I would say, more linked with also academic world. So thanks for that a lot. I will start, I think, with some questions that we had also within our team, and then we will immediately go into questions that are already appearing in the chat. So on the cover page, on the communication, the European Commission communication about European Bauhaus, it's written "sustainable, beautiful, together." It's quite actually surprising, I think, for some of us at least, to see a word "beautiful" there, and it immediately attracts attention. So these are apparently the keywords for the new European Bauhaus, and I was actually wondering what's then maybe the biggest problem then the European Bauhaus is trying to solve? Is this some kind of a over-exploitation or ugliness or social exclusion? What's your opinion?
So it's all three, of course. And when you know, lots of people get thrown by this idea of beauty and aesthetics. What we have created in our concept paper is a way to think about this, is that aesthetics is not just this domain of the cultural elite, someone deciding that something looks beautiful over something else, but it's actually something that reflects how we deal with nature, how we interact with nature, how are we exploiting our natural resources, are we over-exploiting, as you have quite rightly mentioned. And also aesthetics is also something that belongs to a multiplicity of visions from different types of people and different kinds of communities. So it also links to inclusion in that sense. So it's not an old-fashioned way of looking at beauty as just a beautiful piece of artwork that you know sits in a sculpture park, but it's actually something that is more of an ethical, I would say, approach to how we think about things. Again, I think the whole European Bauhaus program is really shifting our preconceptions. It starts from our. I mean, we are very, very privileged to have policymakers at the top who are not only brave but really believe that we need to shift the way that we think about things, and that also they are so open to the suggestions from the high-level roundtable. I must highlight some of my wonderful colleagues there. For instance, we have Sheila Patel, who runs women's collectives in India, and who is constantly bringing this perspective that's beyond Europe. We also have the architect Shigeru Ban, who works with affordable housing all over the world, in Africa and in various parts of Asia. And it's really, really illuminating and inspiring to have those kinds of people on board. Not only do you then learn about different types of aesthetics that work for different kinds of communities around the world, but also it stops you from being so Eurocentric, because of course, if we want to be sustainable, we can't afford to just think of Europe, because, you know, we can solve it for Europe, but then we will still be affected by what happens everywhere else.
Okay, thanks for that. Indeed, this is a bit wider than just Europe and just one field of activity. My second question will actually already go directly to research innovation. How research innovation, how much involved this part of the European policy is in European Bauhaus. We see some links even directly mentioned in the especially Horizon Europe work program for missions. So if you could elaborate a bit more about the links between research innovation and the new European Bauhaus, please.
So it's really being rolled out across the program. So if you start to read all of the most recent calls that are, I believe, the first round of deadlines is in February, if I'm correct in saying so, that are actually being prepared by the various programs like Connect and DGRTD. I think you'll find that there is a NEB component in many of those, particularly if they involve citizen engagement, but also if they involve experimentation and if they involve evidence-based research, so where we need to collect information from the ground. So there is and also if they, of course, if they have this big mission about sustainability and contributing to the Green Deal too. So there have been several that have been presented recently. There were a couple of sessions within the European Bauhaus program that were briefing on all different types of calls that have the NEB component. So not the calls that are actually devoted to NEB, but that they actually have the NEB component in them. And it was really refreshing to see just how many directorates or how many officers have actually included that in their calls. It involved people like, the calls that involve citizen science, for instance. DG Connect has quite a lot of CSAs, coordination actions, about gathering communities. There are some that are to do with space data. So again, connecting space data with communities, etc. So it is this idea that you can actually generate a huge amount of knowledge if you galvanize people on the ground, and has been proven to work really, really well in some global initiatives. You may be aware, for instance, of initiatives such as Galaxy Cruise, where they, I think the Japanese National Observatory engaged literally thousands and thousands of people globally to actually process the data and the information they are getting from satellites. And then what they are able to do with that is turn it into, train their machine learning and AI systems to actually do that job. But then they can deploy let's say, the hobbyists or the fans or the citizen scientists to another new task. So it's a real resource. We can actually really use this resource. And you're probably also aware of, for instance, our network of living labs that was founded in Europe, and that is now a global phenomenon because it's actually been rolled out because it works so well. I always have to emphasize this. These communities are not just for validation; they are actually for the creation of new research directions, because they constantly open new vistas when they are engaged. So there is a tremendous amount. If you can actually have a look across the program, and I think it's being deemed as really rather valuable as a method for research.
Indeed, we see quite some calls with NEP, but still this idea is not completely clear to everyone. I think it's still relatively new, so it's good that we have opportunity also to talk now. I wanted to ask one more question from my side, but at the moment I also see that there is a very similar one already in the chat. So I think we can directly go to Q&A now, and I will put first this question that I was also thinking about. That's the question from Peter, and he's representing Manifest 2020, and the question goes like that. Could you tell us a bit more about NEP Lab? What's the role of the lab and its functioning?
So first of all, Peter, if you are an official partner, I sincerely hope you're part of the co-creation process, because this is not, again, something that we will cook up, or some of us might cook up and then deliver to you. Everything that's being done is being done with so many people. Like when we have meetings about the NEB lab, there are, I can't remember, there's just a huge amount of people who are contributing to the process, and we use all kinds of tools for co-creation so that everybody can be part of it. It's been really, really refreshing. It's really great in that sense. So the function of it is very much to involve as many people on the ground as possible in the most fruitful way, so that basically people can really engage with creating new ideas for the Green Deal. And I think if you have a look at what has been done so far in terms of gathering the wonderful inputs from people on the, you can go to the NEP website and you can actually have a look at the wonderful inputs that have been made by people to the possible solutions or existing projects. Lots of projects that use natural materials and that create solutions for our living environment in a new way. That's an example of the sorts of projects we want to incentivize further. And we want to also create a wonderful space for collaboration, because collaboration has been working really, really well so far, and it makes us progress a great deal faster in terms of creating solutions. So working across disciplines is incredibly important. And then incentivizing the activities in the right kind of way. So not in the traditional project proposal writing way, because there are we want to be as inclusive as possible. So we want to create mechanisms that may work also for those who may have previously been excluded. It's a co-creation process. By all means, as a partner, please do engage with it, and you can actually have a say in the matter.
Okay, thanks. I see in the chat that Peter is a part of it. He just wanted to attract the attention also to the topic for the whole audience. Thanks for that. I was also wondering about the Snap Lab when I was reading about it. So thanks for more info. Okay, let's now see what other questions we have in the chat. I think it's also quite important to involve different actors in this, and one of them are the regions, I think. What is the role for the regions in NEP, and how can they contribute?
So we are very, very keen that this is not just a centralized activity, and that this is really rolled out across the regions. So we are very keen to work with the regional governments, and we're looking now at various different ways in which that can be leveraged. There are several different, something that I forgot to mention also when you said about what sort of parts of the European program is NEB affecting. I mean, EIT has already taken some initiatives to put some funds forward for activities, and that's already been implemented, for instance, and they are also incentivizing parts of Europe that perhaps are not, the usual suspects. So what we are very, very keen to do is that we don't end up with, we have got centers of excellence in Europe. We all know what those are. And of course they are active, and of course they're engaged. There's absolutely no question about that, because of course also they are developing solutions for sustainability that are very much cutting edge. So we do need to have those. But it would be completely a missed opportunity if only some big centers were to be active in NEB. What's really, really important is to harness all of the intelligence on the ground from all of the regions, and also actually consider their particular use cases and their particular needs, because when it comes to sustainability, we have areas of Europe that are, for instance, far more liable to sea rise and the danger from climate change in that perspective. So they need one type of solutions. Then there are other regions that are exposed to other types of environmental risks, and we need to actually scoop all of those use cases and find solutions to all of them, and not just in the big centers. So we're working on this very much at the moment, on partnerships and strategies with the different instruments that can allow this to happen. The labs would be encouraged, or will be encouraged, in all of the regions, in partnership with all of the regional governments.
Okay, and you also work with the Committee of the Regions?
We are in talks with the Committee of the Regions, so I've been briefed. So that's all I can say at the moment.
Fine, thank you. Then the next question is going back a bit to different calls that are there as it comes to funding. And for one of the participants, it seemed a bit vague when he was scanning them. So the question is whether those calls published at the moment are meeting your expectations, and if you could also share some information about the next call.
Are you referring here to the new European Bauhaus calls? Sorry. So the European Bauhaus calls that are in the first round. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Just gonna drink. So the new European Bauhaus calls that in the first round were designed, I think probably 2 years ago, you know, when calls are designed. So the fortuitous thing has happened is that we've been able to, or rather various different DGs have been able to insert European Bauhaus as an element of the existing calls, which is really, really great. But the current European Bauhaus calls were designed something like 2 years ago. So nobody from the high-level roundtable had anything to do with the writing of those. We are apparently influencing the next round. So possibly why they appear to be, when you sort of use the word vague, is because the whole way that the European Bauhaus was designed was as a co-creation process, which at that point was not initiated. But because of the way that the funds are divided and apportioned, the whole system, the way that the system works, they had to be put forward at that point. So they had to be, let's say, as specific as possible in terms of the grand missions or the vision that existed in terms of launching this in the first place, but as vague as possible so that they can be actually shaped by the co-creation process that happened in the interim. So in that sense, if you follow now where we are with it, and if you actually look at what's happening on the NEB website, if you follow the all of the conferences and all of the briefings, there are actually, you know, the briefings, for instance, on calls attracted 3,000 viewers. So basically people are very, very interested in this, and this is why they attend these briefings, because you can actually get the most recent information about where we are at and what is how are we shaping the vision and the mission. The other aspect to this is that, of course, if you do grasp what we are trying to do here, then your input is also important, and you can actually propose a way forward and a suggestion for how we should shape the response to those calls. So again, we are, you know, the European Bauhaus does encourage being proactive from the ground, and rather than this idea of top-down dictating to you how you should shape your thinking. So this is another thing, that if you find something vague, by all means say what it should be and give us your solution.
Thank you. Indeed, it seems to be a work in progress on one side, and on the other side, something that sometimes we are not very much used to when it comes to EU calls. So it's not that prescriptive. It's really depending on what we are doing with it, and maybe the vague is actually a positive thing at the end, because we can do whatever we want with it, interpret it in our way. Okay, thank you. Now we have also one question going more into the content, let's say. So, how the nature and biodiversity is included in the Bauhaus.
This is really, really huge. So when we talk about the living environment, many people think about the construction industry, which of course does require huge rethink. because it is a hugely polluting sector. So even within that sector, going over to more sustainable materials is an important mission, which is currently being taken up by not only the policymakers and organizations that are representing the sector, but also by the sector themselves. So some of the large companies in the sector have really migrated to this way of thinking, or they are in the process of doing so. So in that sense, the nature and biodiversity are also relying on us, on how we use it, on our current extractive practice. Lots of industries have to also rethink their use of natural materials in terms of overuse and extractive practice. So there is that side of things, but also in terms of this idea of living environment, not just being city centers, but actually extending to the surrounding areas, and the two have an impact on each other. So again, if you have a look at our concept paper, which is on the European Bauhaus website, if you go to the high-level roundtable, the first thing you will see is the concept paper link, and you can download it. You will see just how many of the recommendations in there and how many areas of focus are devoted to nature and biodiversity. It is also present in a huge amount of the prizes that were given. So that there were NEB prizes, which were in the region of 30,000 euros each, and they were the huge amount of prizes were given also in this area for solutions that were considering nature and biodiversity. So by all means, have a look at the material. There's even a gallery that you can navigate to look at all the prizes. It's designed a bit like an exhibition space. It's also it takes a few clicks to get there on the NEB European Bauhaus website of the European Commission, but you will, if you find it, you can actually navigate all of these different wonderful solutions in kind of virtual reality.
Thank you for this. So it's a bit more than just the Green Deal. We are going more into the biodiversity and nature by itself, which is of course very much linked with the priorities in general. Now a bit of a switch of topic to culture. So there is a question about non-profit organizations dealing with culture and how they can and be involved.
So again, uniquely, this policy mission places culture at the center of policy making. Really, really important. Complete shift in how we perceive what culture means in terms of the European Commission, because you're probably aware that culture was part of the culture program of the European Director for Education and Culture. So it was one aspect of the program. It's now integrated across the program as a very important element. Also, when you realize how the European program worked previously, it was really very much in line with the mission of the European Commission that was originally established as a facilitator of exchanges of culture across different nation states, as opposed to a body that puts culture in the center. So this is a big shift. It's because of the Constitution. The Constitution of the European Commission actually has culture is the remit of individual nation states. So there are individual cultures within Europe. That's how it was originally perceived. And of course, we are now in a pan-European environment. We all collaborate together. There is such a thing as a common culture. And so the space has also matured for us to be able to put our common culture at the center of our thinking, and but it does rather push forward this or rather changes the paradigm for the European Commission, also constitutionally. So so this element is incredibly important. Now, the not-for-profits are again very, very important, because if you look at all of the partners that have been accepted, there were lots and lots of applications for partners. There are currently, on my last count, around 250 partners. They're official partners. They're all not-for-profit. They're all either governmental or not-for-profit or NGO type of institutions. So there was a decision made that partners should be a not-for-profit, so that there isn't a particular sort of proprietary or a sort of push or a let's say a corporate gain that's seen in having an interest in this. That's not to say that we don't work with industry, that we don't want industry to get involved, that we don't want commercial partners to also get engaged. But when it comes to the co-creation process, it was felt that not-for-profits were the ones who need to be engaged in this way. So really, I should say that both in terms of culture and being a not-for-profit, that the European Bauhaus is very much the vehicle that you should be engaging with, and that I think these new mechanisms that are being designed at the moment will really give you the opportunity to do so.
Thank you for this, and the idea of non-profits actually brings also the contrary, so the private sector as well, and the questions about that. And there is one that it's related to the fact that it's very difficult to do everything with public money. So are there any initiatives also to involve private sector to spend their money on the initiatives linked with NEP?
Yes, you probably heard of the amount of times that public-private initiatives or partnerships are being mentioned, and this is huge strategy at the moment. So it's not only the fact that this is being encouraged, but actually there is a huge amount of interest from private stakeholders. There are implications, of course, when we all work together for the Green Deal, then of course there are implications on how industry operates and how private organizations are run, how they can establish sustainability better, how they can find better solutions in terms of establish a more sustainable practice. So the sustainable solutions that we are encouraging through co-creation are the ones that are actually going to give them the ability to solve some of their problems. And so that side of things is incredibly important. It's a great resource for them. It's also a huge space for their employees to upskill, for instance, in this direction, in terms of sustainability practices, and in terms of innovation. So co-creation and innovation. So there's just it's very, very many that are already. Let's say that they are engaged in terms of being constantly following the developments, on actually initiating some things by themselves or in collaboration with some of the partners. And we do expect more of that to roll out, especially through these new mechanisms and like the lab. And I suspect that in the festival that's also being designed, there will be representatives from private organizations as well.
Thank you very much. Indeed, it's difficult to achieve such an ambitious goal only with one source of funding. So it's good to hear that also the private sector by itself is interested, but indeed to have a public-private partnership, it takes time. So it's a great challenge, I think. One other question that appeared before the event was about the enthusiasm about that. That in some parts of Europe you can have a lot of enthusiasm and understanding, and some others maybe not exactly. But to have the success, it should be actually somehow taken on board by different stakeholders in different countries and on different levels. So, do you have any plan, like plan B, let's say, to overcome any possible resistance?
Absolutely. So when it comes to sort of this idea of radical inclusion, if we are able to engage people who are skeptical about these ideas, it is through this co-creation and exchange that they may get more information about what's in it for them. And usually when people are resistant to something, it is because they can't see what's in it for them. They just simply cannot see the benefits, and they just think it's, it just looks very alien and looks like another gimmick or something. So what our experience has shown is that when we engage people, when they're involved in the process, they're able to infer that what is really of value there, and they are allowed to take their own takeaway from this. Also, this space is open to criticism. It's open to people being able to join in and say, actually, you're doing this bit wrong. Or in order for all of us to be included in this, we need X, Y, and Z. Once again, it is about, this is, properly about democratic participation. So for anybody who's skeptical, I would strongly encourage them to actually get involved and get their voices heard, and actually see if they have they can actually envisage some benefits. One other aspect that I would mention is, again, from the co-creation on the ground, from being hands-on with things. When things are more hands-on and experiential, so when we don't just talk around tables about hypothetical things where each person around the table is imagining a completely different use case scenario, so therefore that's why they tend to disagree. When they are going through a common experience, you end up with a completely different perception of what the problem might be and why some solutions are necessary. And so again, through hands-on engagement, not just being vocal, but also actually being engaged physically in processes, those kinds of people who might have been skeptical actually find that a new perspective on things. And when it comes to, solving this massive challenge that we are facing, it's not just an ambition. This is about the reality of our situation as human beings, and as sort of the resources that we currently have to protect and have to actually be able to survive the next kind of 50 years. I always quote the polder model, which is the Dutch model where, when the floods come, everybody needs to gang up, no matter what they know, or what sector they come from, or what cultural background or social background they come from. Every person's knowledge is important at that point to invest in being able to solve this. So in the same way, in this particular instance, I would encourage those kinds of stakeholders to actually get involved with what they know.
Yeah, it's a bit of not to be afraid that much, because we are usually afraid of the unknown. So if it's getting a bit more closer to us, then it's easier. Okay, we are closely coming to an end, but there are still some questions, and one is very concrete, I would say, around wood use and some contradiction between NEP and Fit for 55, so the very famous policy agenda point at the moment. And what would you think about that?
So I'm glad this is mentioned because, of course, we have lots of partners that represent the wood industry, and there are big debates on the whether we have sufficient resources there to actually turn the construction industry into more of a natural sort of use of more natural materials that are less harmful or less polluting to the environment. And of course, wood is a great resource. But again, if you actually read our concept paper from the high-level roundtable, you will actually see that we recommend a new approach to forestry management. This is another. It's not so. The wood industry is not seen in isolation. It's actually seen as part of a whole. Again, it's this idea of the shifting paradigm of the ecosystemic approach. So we actually need to consider it from the beginning, from the resource itself, from how the ground is managed. There is scientific literature more recently published about the communication underground that's obviously facilitated by the mycelium between the different on the forest floor, for example. And there is a dominant factor there. There's usually a tree that's a dominant for the ecosystem. And therefore, if you have more knowledge about how those underground systems work, you would never eliminate the dominant factor in an ecosystem the way that we currently fell the entire forest, and then we reforest, and we think it will reestablish itself the same as it did before, but it actually works rather differently. So it's about knowledge. It's about applying scientific knowledge and research to how we manage the forest floor, inform industry about this, get the industry to be on board with those types of principles, and actually have this more sustainable way that we manage this. And then, of course, actually have a very, very strong, this is why I mentioned data-driven systems, because we need to have a strong management of the full value network of supply and demand to actually be able to have the right data about how much is being exploited, how much is being used, is it sustainable, etc. So none of these things are just kind of like, let's just go in this direction without thinking. All of this requires cross-disciplinary, cross-domain approach, full value network view, and then collecting all of the different aspects. There are some European projects actually already that are working in this. There's one called Basa Jaun, which is actually looking at the entire value network from the extraction of the wood to the wood industry for construction. So some have already initiated the work on this. So all of these things would be a contradiction if you were to just be blinkered and just look in one aspect, just one aspect of it. Then of course you'll say, well, what about over here? But if you have an ecosystemic approach, this is why we advocate for an ecosystemic approach. You should be able to actually see the full picture and balance the ecosystem. That's what we're trying to do.
Okay, and since we have only a few minutes left, I will just go directly to one or maybe two last questions. This one is actually quite interesting because it's going into the impact more. Like, okay, there's money there for different projects from the EU, and as we already found out, also hopefully from other sources. And what will happen next? Who will be the recipients of those project results?
Who will be recipient of the funding or of the project results? Is this
the results
of the results of the projects that are funded? I think all of us. So we are working jointly towards solutions. The idea is that we leverage as much talent as possible to create solutions, and that we also gang up across disciplines and actually create this space for common understanding where we can exchange knowledge, which is possible. It's not just speak. We have done it now. We have tested it. It works really well if you create the right kind of conditions where each stakeholder actually has takeaway for themselves as well, that they actually see the benefit, that where the researchers, for instance, gain sufficient new information and knowledge, they can run off and write papers, where the industry can really invest in new kinds of products as a result of it, where all of the innovation communities can really be supported to thrive by contributing to these kinds of environments. So the recipients of the results then of what we co-create are us, really. Again, there are so many levels to this. One is that if you galvanize communities on the ground, and if each one of these people, through engagement with this process, is able to up their own personal development, so upskill in this environment, or take one step forward in their personal development, you have a phenomenal social transformation just on that level. This is without actually thinking about the source of solutions that are being produced. This is about gaining new knowledge, understanding why perhaps we need to behave in different ways in terms of recycling or in terms of how we treat our environment. But also these kinds of skills that are acquired are incredibly useful for business. They're incredibly useful for research. They're useful to advance us generally as a society. And then, you know, it's a multiplier, because of course, the more skills you gain as part of this co-creation process, the more excellence you can produce, or the more likely you're likely to produce the right kind of solutions. And the solutions, of course, are also at that point, they are equally applicable to, if it's an inclusive environment, applicable to all included, because everybody had a say in the matter. So everybody is able to then see how it will benefit them. That it means that it is much more broadly applicable. So that's why I'm saying it's really for all of us.
Thank you very much. And I think we are now really going to an end. So still there are some questions in the chat, but 1 hour passed. So I hope we will maybe have some other occasions also to continue these discussions, because basically the topic is very interesting, and it will develop within years, I think, with more different calls appearing here and there. Also in Horizon Europe, which is the program we are mainly dealing with. So let's see what will happen and what will be created around us, also with the concept of European Bauhaus in mind. Okay, thanks a lot. First of all, to you, Michela, for being with us, for finding time and joining us, and also to our participants for their presence and questions asked before the event and also now during the event. I hope we answered most of them. And I hope also to see you at the next Brussels Talks events next year in January, February. We already have some surprises, I think, for you, and we will soon send some information about that. And in the meantime, stay healthy, of course, and also have a happy holidays that are coming soon. So again, thanks a lot, and see you at our other events.
Thank you. Thanks again for having me.